I love everything about the death game genre. Whether it's in anime, TV dramas, or video games, there's just something so cathartic about being introduced to a group of characters who are coerced into a life or death situation, and have to follow some silly little rules on top of it. Any major plays a character pulls off are all the more satisfying when we know they're doing it under the additional stress and restrictions. And when they lose, seeing that person break under the realization that this Mario Party 9 results-ass looking screen of all things is the last thing they'll ever know feels like a special kind of cruel, and makes it all the easier to hate the host. And the host! Half the fun is seeing how this monster of a person bounces off of everyone else. From the first moment they reveal the latest inhuman challenge that's up to bat, to the last moments of a contestant's life as they beg, bargain, or even lash out at the person who brought them to this place, there's this twisted authority these characters take on to justify using torture as live entertainment. And as a result, nearly every death game story is about the protagonist not only surviving, but finding out how to confront the host and end the game. And while that comes with its own satisfaction, what if I told you there was a game where instead of breaking a death game apart, you were hosting one? Library of Ruina is a game that, despite having more content warnings than side effects on your standard painkillers, manages to be surprisingly upbeat and fun just as often as it's harrowing and painful, giving you this feeling of running a death game as the main event in a casino. It all starts with this guy, Roland, a man who got so lost trying to buy a sandwich he wandered into an alternate dimension and found the titular library, only to be met with its AI host Angela, who proceeds to break all of his limbs and knock him out. Minutes later, Roland wakes in the main hall of the library with all of his injuries healed by Angela, who then places him in indentured servitude, forced to defend the place against any invited guests. And this arrangement is what makes up our host and assistant dynamic, as well as the main driving force of the game. Because unlike regular libraries, this place's purpose is to collect and hoard knowledge rather than give it out. And all that's done through these little invitations. Anyone who receives one is given the offer to fight the librarians within, allowing them to take any books they want upon winning. But if they lose, the guests will instead be turned into books themselves. The idea being that with enough books, Angela can find a way to free herself from her restrictions as an AI, as well as maybe something else. And if you're wondering why anyone would agree to risking their life and limb just for the sake of some books, well, I'm glad you've never had to seriously consider joining the US Army. But if that's not enough to convince you, let me introduce you to some very important people. Outside in the backstreets of some place you'd never want to be are these three: Pete, Lenny, and Mang-Chi, rushing to harvest organs from a body and escape before the authorities can catch on to him. Having no money, no remaining family, and no authority to speak of, these three are fittingly called rats due to mainly moving in groups and acting out of a desperation to simply survive. And today, they've taken an organ harvesting job for a reasonably powerful crime syndicate called the Stray Dogs. Pete in particular, having a dream to be a big name in the crime underworld, is hoping to use this as a way to work his way up the ladder. However, something odd happens. While Lenny's able to finish the job, any organs she harvested were somehow mangled beyond recognition before this man was even knocked out. And stranger still, there was an envelope in the man's body, which states that if they sign it, they'll have the opportunity to get any books they want after overcoming a trial. Pete, in hopes of salvaging his dream, jumps on this offer. Mang-Chi and Lenny, while not as hopeful, are aware they're as good as dead if they come back empty-handed, and agree to sign as well. Which means at this moment, the rats have become the first guests of the library. Given a last chance to survive and rebuild their lives, they enter its brightly lit halls, prepare their weapons, and meet Roland on the battleground. All that remains is for Pete to overcome this single lost man, his team rising to the occasion as he... Yeah, so rule 1 of Library of Ruina. Much like a casino, the house always wins. It doesn't matter if the invitation's sent to a couple of cannibal chefs who have a surprisingly healthy partnership, a group of lawyers led by their little light bright boss, or this group of tailors known only as the Carnival. Every conflict begins with being introduced to the hopes, dreams, whatever the hell else have ya of any new group of people, before inevitably bringing their lives to an end. But hey, y'all know as well as I do, death is only one half of the death game experience, ain't it? So how exactly does the game part of this go? Well, let me ask you something. Why play a game with only dice or cards when you can have both? Much like any turn-based combat game, the big idea here is to get that funny little HP number to 0, and maybe the yellow one while we're at it. Pick your attacks every turn, look at the dice on your cards or pages, let them rip, and then see how big the numbers go against the others. And there's no need to get out any D6s, D8s, or D20s either. A D 1 to 2, 3 to 7, or 2 to 5 will do the job too. It's just as simple as that. Well, okay, maybe there is a little more to the combat. You see, every fighter has a resource called light that they use to pay for pages, which limits how much output you can use each turn. Oh, and after every fight, you can have an Alabama barbecue and burn the books of your opponents, which will allow you to take their pages and stats. Some fights are against these eldritch abominations called abnormalities, which lie inside the library and are these puzzle battles that'll reward you with additional forbidden powers. Every attack also has a move type, which some characters are either weak to or strong against. After the first few fights, you'll start to get more librarians to back you up too. Every time you clash with an enemy, you'll get an emotion coin, which allows you to refill your light quickly once you get enough. If you fill up everyone's emotion levels enough, you'll get abnormality pages that can power up a librarian of your choice. Eventually, enemies will come by being able to use multiple attacks per turn. You will meet Philip. Some pages have the ability to paralyze, burn, or bleed the target on hit. Over time, you'll unlock more floors of the library, each with their own abnormality pages as the game continues on. You will meet Philip. Later, you'll not only take the moves and forms of your guests, but mix and match their passive abilities as well. Mass attacks allow you to attack all enemies at once, but are first used against you when fighting the Queen of Hatred. You will meet Philip, the Mountain of Smiling Bodies. Robot PTSD therapy, summoning the power of monsters through ego pages. Bird Zodiac. You will meet Philip. The second coming of Jesus! Philip. The 4 magical girls of the apocalypse! So, once you get past the first few little mechanics, it still gets hard. But hey, nobody runs a library because it's easy, right? And we haven't even gotten to the crushing sense of guilt yet, because one minute, you're some indentured literature wannabe gladiator, and the next you're getting slapped in the face with a guest or a monster that knows just how to mix you up. So what do? Easy. You become a writer, mix them up yourself, win, rinse, repeat, and turn it into a gacha game. And after a while, seeing a new invitation becomes just as much about testing your new silly little pages as it is inspiring some first edition obituaries. And it gets even more interesting with many people coming to the library not out of hope or desperation, but simply out of revenge for the ones you already took from them. Every single one increasing the notoriety and bounty on this entire place for more people to try and take it down. Which again means new books, new fights, and new stories. Ad infinitum, baby! And as the human wave tactics start to fail even the strongest of fighters, you eventually have to ask yourself the question, is this really consent? Are so many people truly enthralled by what the library has to offer? Or are they just being forced to choose between the kinder of two deaths? And even if that's the case, is there any way out? And is it even your business to try and find that out when you're still trying to survive yourself? You've got your own problems. That's that, and this is this, no matter how many times it happens. And if that's the case, well, why don't we just have some fun filling up the shelves? What's the worst that could happen? Library of Ruina is a game with fantastic music, intricate combat, and characters given so much detail that it feels like such a shame for them to meet their end. And because of that, expect to see more videos out about the city and those that live in it sometime soon. If you haven't already seen it, there's one that recently came out about my personal favorite story, Lovetown. So if you feel like there just isn't enough content that talks about these characters, please, feel free to let me know in the comments what character, setting, or story you'd like to see. Hell, you could even see it early by joining my Patreon. But until then, goons, have fun cracking some spines. Make sure to like the subscribe button, and I'll catch you later.